My name is Jeremy Biggs again, also known as the guy who's going to keep you from lunch. But again, my name is Jeremy. I work for a company called Sonnax Industries in Vermont, which I actually discovered has fewer residents than Detroit does. So you've got a bona fide country bumpkin up here talking to you today. But that's all right, because I think that Sonnax really has some important insights to offer the Aras community, specifically with regard to taking Innovator beyond the initial PLM rollout. We've been using Innovator for about a decade now, and one of the things I want to talk about is what that road has actually looked like for us. But Innovator's actually been more than just a software platform for me personally. My career has seen a fantastic change of direction because of the work that we're doing in Innovator today. So I've got kind of a two-threaded story to tell here. I got one part Sonnax and one part me, and I'm just going to hope I don't end up looking like a narcissist by the end here. Okay, so I'm going to start out with let's get this going here. Just a few words about Sonnax, what kind of company we are, what we do, and how that plays into what we're doing with Innovator today. Then I'm going to just talk a little bit about our PLM implementation, why we moved to Aras, and some of the improvements that we achieved there. Then I'm going to back up and talk really briefly about where I came from and how I ended up working in Innovator on a daily basis. And that part's going to lead into the main portion of this presentation, which is encouraging the use of Innovator for more than just the standard PLM stuff. So we'll talk about some of the things that have really come together at Sonnax to help us drive bigger and better use of the Innovator platform. And by bigger, I'm not talking huge and complex here. Toward the end, I'm going to show you an example or two of modules that we developed at Sonnax that really have helped us move away from this mentality of doing processes one way just because that's the way it's always been done. But again, they're very simple in their design. Okay, Sonnax Industries. So the company got started back in 1978, which actually is the year I was born, believe it or not. And from the beginning, we've been manufacturing components for the automotive aftermarket, specifically for automatic transmissions. So we got started with a few Allison transmission parts and some torque converter items. And from there, we kind of grew those product lines over time and into the mid-90s when we introduced some specialized fixes for the valve bodies themselves. Today, we've got parts for a lot of parts of the vehicle transmission, or the driveline. And we ship all those parts worldwide. We've got, I think, customers in about 70 countries right now. We have a really solid reputation in our industry for the dependable high quality of our parts, but also for the technical expertise that we offer. So when rebuilders in the field find that there's an issue cropping up with a transmission, they'll often call on Sonnax to try and get started on a fix for that. So as I said, we have a great reputation, and for me, it's been really great to be a part of that company. Sonnax actually became an ESOP 4 years ago. So we are 100% employee owned. We've got about 225 employees working for us today. And I think that the transition to an ESOP really kind of got the Aras ball rolling faster than it had been in past years. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. We are an ISO registered company, and we've been very purposeful in finding ways of minimizing our impact to the environment, especially in such a beautiful state as Vermont. But one of the best things about Sonnax is really the whole package that it brings together. Sonnax has been voted one of the best places to work in Vermont because of all the things that it's doing right. So they've got a fantastic culture of work-life balance. We've got a great wellness program in place that's helped a lot of employees make great strides in improving their health. And they're not afraid to invest in the professional development of their people. I've actually personally benefited from that, as well as the others, and I can say that they really contribute to a strong and persistent desire for us to give back to the company through our work. It's one of the reasons why Sonnax is one of the fastest growing companies in Vermont, but it's also, as we'll see a little later, has a lot to do with driving your Aras implementation forward. These are some of our manufacturing capabilities, none of which I'm even remotely capable of explaining, but I think you can tell from the list that we do a lot of our work in-house. And what that ends up meaning for Aras is that there's a lot of important processes there that we use to help, for Aras to help us manage. A lot of our parts require very tight tolerances, and of course we try and make sure that every part that goes out the door is done right the first time. So we have some solid equipment in place to do that, and some stringent QC policies that really help us make that happen. And again, with Aras, we're using Aras in that capacity to really make us more efficient there. We have in-house engineering for our product development and manufacturing teams. We actually provide technical support, live phone technical support for all of our products, more than 120 of which are patented or patent pending. We've got prototyping, valve body testing labs, and we also do live vehicle testing as well. I actually pulled these last few slides from another presentation that we used to talk about Sonnax, and you can see that we actually call out our reliance on PLM software as a point of importance. Because let's face it, if we did not have Innovator, we really would not be where we are today. Okay, so our implementation. So we got started with Aras back in 2004, and it had become exceedingly obvious to us that we needed a better way to handle our new product development. Our project tracking capability, it looked just like this. It was awful. I mean, we had spreadsheets all over the place that were only accessible to the elite few among us. We had a simple database of activities and some workflow software called Lexine. Anyone ever heard or used Lexine before? Okay, that's probably a good thing. It was a bad picture. We had almost no visibility into where a project was on the timeline and who had responsibility for it. We actually had a single person who I call the PLM overlord here, whose job it was to try and keep all the stitches together as best they could. And they were pretty much the only person who could say with any certainty where, and sometimes not even that, where a project was in the process here. So we had this huge PLM nightmare, and we needed to get to our PLM heaven on the other side here. And we knew that that was going to end up meaning we needed to find a PLM solution that fit our ideal vision of what new product development should look like. And for our company, first and foremost, that meant that it needed to be flexible. Really, that was the first thing on our list, because it needed to fit how we do NPD. I mean, it wasn't that our process was broken. It was that it had become too complex to try and manage piecemeal anymore. It also had to provide 100% accessibility for every person that touched the project. Everyone had to be able to see where it was and who had control of it. And then, of course, we had our budgetary constraints. So our research kind of narrowed down to two possible options. We looked at Oracle's Agile software, and we looked at Aras Innovator. And we had one demo of Oracle's software, and that put them right out of the running. I mean, they just were not flexible enough to do what we wanted to do. And honestly, we took one look at their pricing structure and said, no, that's not happening. So Innovator was the complete opposite for us. We could get a totally custom solution based on we do NPD, and there was no talk of bankrupting us. So at the time, Aras had not yet implemented their subscription services, but what we ended up doing was getting a completely custom solution using what now amounts to their consulting services. So Aras built everything for us from the ground up. They did item type creation, they did workflows, life cycles, custom methods, data migration, user training and documentation. I mean, they did the whole shebang. And if you've never actually worked with Aras on a project like that, they really do a nice job of handling the details there. But as I said, so completely ground up, we got exactly what we wanted. No one is ever in the dark about where a project stands. And we cut out the swaths of time that we were using trying to track down project status and who had responsibility for it. So One of the best features that we found, though, was that when we find a new way of doing something in our current process, we always find that it can be done in Innovator as well. So new product development was the first phase that we kind of went through there, and that was introduced in May of 2005. And kind of in the middle of that phase, we hadn't really figured out what we were going to be going after at the very beginning, but we decided that kind of in the middle of that phase, we were going to move after engineering change notices, ECNs, and quality inspection. And those two modules came out just a few months afterwards. And they were built in the same way that new product development was. Aras built those for us from the ground up. And that pretty much wrapped up our PLM implementation. The customer complaints module that I have listed here, I call them modules too, so I'm right there with Peter on that one. This module that we introduced is significant for a couple reasons. The first one is that if you look at the timeline and the dates that are there, we did a lot of great work with Innovator in 2005. And then we had this block of a year and a half where nothing really happened until we introduced the customer complaints. A year and a half is not necessarily a long time, given that we were pretty new to the platform, but the fact is that when we moved our complaints to Aras, it wasn't because someone had looked at Innovator and said, hey, I think that would be a much better place to put customer complaints, which it was. At the time, we had a homegrown solution in place that had been developed and, developed and maintained by one person. And guess what? That person was no longer at Sonnax. So we had no way of troubleshooting, finding issues, fixing them, that kind of thing, short of hiring someone into this homegrown scenario here with no way of bringing them up to speed. So we looked at the tools that we had available to us and we said, hey, Innovator can definitely do this, let's put it there. And it ended up being a great decision that we made, but it was one that could have been made months earlier before we actually had an issue. The other reason that complaints is a little significant is because it was brought into production in the same month that I actually came to Sonnax. So as I said, I'm just going to back up and talk a little bit about where I came from, and I promise it's at least passably relevant to where I'm going with this. So I graduated from college in 2001, and I spent the next 6 ridiculously long years working in retail management. It was for Staples. Staples wasn't the issue. It was retail in general. It just was not for me. And in the middle of that, we were rolling out our Easy Tech program, and I discovered that the IT industry was really where I wanted to be. But the work that I was doing for Staples, and then later on as a sales analyst for Sonnax, really ended up helping me to develop an unexpected skill in process improvement. So I spent a lot of time pulling people and departments together to try and find better ways of getting things done. At the same time, I was working on trying to build up some of that hardware and programming knowledge to really snag that seat in IT when the chance arose. And that happened in 2012. And the seat turned out to be this giant gem-encrusted throne with a foot of cushy memory foam. I mean, I really love what I do. And the other reason has everything to do with what we're doing in Aras at Sonnax today. So before I pull that together and tie it back with what we're actually doing, I just want to look at the question of what do I like about Innovator so much? What is it that we as a group really like about what Aras brings to the table? At the risk of preaching to the choir here, I'm just going to lay out a few of those things. So the first, of course, is that it is open source. Anybody can use it. They can use it for as long as they want, and they can share what they're doing with anyone else out there. We don't have any crazy expensive licensing fees. We just install it and we do what we want. And that by itself is huge. We also like what we can do with permissions. So we get very granular control over what people can see, what they can change, all that good stuff. So permissions for us are also very important. And for all you mega corporations out there, or I've talked to so many people out there who say we've got 8,000 employees and all that. It's crazy. But we've got scalability. So from the small shops like us, all the way up to the hundreds of thousands of users, the system has been proven to work at that level. And so we know that we're not going to grow too big or too fast for the system to handle. So those are really important pieces of what Aras brings to the table, but the next two are really what is helping Sonnax to really drive our implementation. And the first one I already talked about, and I'm going to say it again because it's important, and that is flexibility. What we like about Innovator is that it can fit into the business processes that we've been honing for years, if not decades. I mean, a lot of times it does make sense for us to mold our business practices to fit a more standardized approach. But the fact is, Aras doesn't force us into that. So we can take Innovator and we can fit it into those process boxes that we need to. Just like little muffins here fits into the box. Flexibility, really, really key for us. And it leads into the next and what I think is the most important and sometimes the most undervalued, not undervalued, but underappreciated feature of Innovator. And that is that it can do cool new stuff. Anyone ever seen the Lego movie that came out last year? Okay, we got a few people. I'm not going to give away the plot here, but one of the main themes of the movie is this idea of building new stuff without the need for the instructions. And this is a picture of the main character here with his admittedly silly idea for a double-decker couch with cup holders. But this is what Innovator really allows us to do. I mean, we can build just about anything we want with this system. But I think a lot of companies get so caught up in the whole PLM thing, which of course is very important. But when they're finished with that, they stop and they sit down and they go, all right, everything looks pretty good. Let's get back to business as usual, as long as your rollout goes nice and smoothly, which of course it always does. What I'm talking about is all the other processes out there that have been around us for so long that we almost don't even see them anymore. What Sonnax is finding is that those processes are everywhere, and the Innovator is an absurdly well-equipped tool to bring those processes into the light, make them more efficient, and ultimately to streamline our work. Okay, so what actually worked for Sonnax? What are the things that are really driving that forward? And then I'm going to try and generalize that for what might help some of you folks out there. So the first thing is, I mentioned earlier that we became an ESOP. So we're employee-owned, and that transition actually brought with it a real change in mindset. So people really started to think much more closely about how their everyday workday choices affected the business. And anything that affects the business affects their share in the company directly. I swear, when we first became an ESOP, that whole first year, no one had round pupils anymore. They were all the dollar signs that you see on the cartoons. But it was really a great thing for Sonnax because people really started to dust their thinking caps off and start thinking much more closely about how to make the business run more efficiently and obviously to increase our profit there. So, and some of those ideas ended up turning to Innovator to see how we can make that happen. And that kind of leads into the next item here, which is a little bit counterintuitive, but I put it up here anyway because it's true. New Innovator modules helped us to kickstart more Innovator development. And what I mean by that is that with the introduction of each new item type that we came out with, we were reminding end users that Innovator is a tool that's there for the taking. It doesn't just do one thing. So people really started to take notice of that, and they start asking questions about, hey, can we use it for this process, or can we use it for this one over here? And then we started getting hit with all these kind of requests. And it really got a snowball effect going for us. And we're seeing real efficiency benefits as a result of that. This is going to sound outrageously egotistical, I know that, but I couldn't find any other way around it, so I put it up here. The last thing is me, and when I say me, I'm talking about everything that about me, my history with process improvement, my career history, even my never-ending gratefulness that I don't have to work in retail anymore. I mean, when I hear back to school, I don't curl up into a ball and have nightmares for 2 weeks. So, but everything about me really ended up making me fairly well equipped to take Innovator and run with it. When I was hired at Sonnax, we were just starting to get hit with, not hired at Sonnax, when I was moved into the IT department, we were just starting to get hit with more requests for Innovator development. And at the time, we have an awesome IT department. I mean, they have always been able to handle the day-to-day configuration. I mean, I work with amazing, amazing people. But what we didn't have yet was someone who could handle some of the deeper development needs that were needed to tackle some of these processes. So what they ended up doing was sending me to the configuring solutions and developing solutions classes that Aras offers, which if you have not taken those yet, you most definitely should schedule yourself. I mean, they are fantastic classes. Bob Ellis is an outstanding instructor. I don't know if he teaches all of them or not, but does he? Okay, great. But it will really give you a real solid wide-angle view of what Innovator really brings to the table and the possibilities that it offers. So I went to those classes and away we went. And I'm completely sold on the Aras platform and what it can do for us. I love working in it. And that enthusiasm and excitement and the skills that I brought from elsewhere have helped to really drive part of this implementation forward. So those are some of the key things that have really worked for Sonnax. I realize that it's not going to be in the cards for everyone to become an ESOP. I mean, that's just not going to happen. But the larger point that I want to make here is this idea of motivating your people to really take ownership of the processes that are around them. And how you do that is a completely different presentation. It could be monetary rewards, it could be public recognition or prizes or whatever. But it's this idea of really getting your people motivated to take that ownership and find new ways to make their own life better at work by making these processes more efficient. The other thing, in order to get that happen, so you want to get them really excited about what Innovator can do for the company and for them. So you have a little bit of bootstrapping to do. So find a process that needs help, get it into Innovator, and then advertise the heck out of it with the rest of your team. I mean, any time that you can, make those new item types and modules visible in the table of contents there so that people can really see what you're doing with it and know the possibilities that are out there so that they get their own noggin thinking. It's really going to get the snowball going for you. So the last thing is the reason why I brought up myself and my career history, and that is that it can be really, really important for you to find what I would call an Innovator champion. Someone in your company who has experience with process improvement, training in Aras, and a real love for putting those two things together. I mean, I know it sounds geeky as all heck, but I love doing this stuff. And before I came to it, I really hadn't spent a lot of time. I didn't have a lot of formal training in doing this stuff. But that's coming along as I dig in. So if you can find someone in your company who really wants this and is constantly working on the needed skill sets to make that happen, and then put that together with the other two items that we have up here, you're really going to find that Aras becomes much more than just a PLM software for you. Okay, so this is a continuation, just to give you an idea of what this looked like for us. This is a continuation of our Aras timeline. The last module that I talked about was our customer complaints module, and that was done in 2007. And you can see that we still had a really sizable block of 5 years here before we really started to engage with Aras on a new level. And that engagement came from everything that we just talked about in the previous slide. You can see starting in 2012 and 13, the snowball getting going there. And so the main goal of my presentation is hopefully to help some of you kind of narrow down that big gap and start thinking more often about, or earlier, about how Innovator can make your other processes beyond PLM more efficient. Okay, so the goal of this is not to try and shovel every possible process in Innovator and call it good, right? I mean, not every process belongs in Innovator. But what Sonnax did find was that a lot of the processes that we did move had some similar characteristics. So I just thought I'd put those up for you here before we take a look at an example or two. So the first thing that we noticed was that a lot of the processes that we moved were derived from numbered forms. And they were numbered to try and help us with traceability so that we could find these things again in case of an audit or someone could find it along the timeline. And of course, Innovator is great for traceability, so numbered forms can be a good indicator that you're looking at a decent Innovator-ready process. The other thing we noticed was that there was often some point in the process where approval was required. And so if you're a manager and you're signing off on something, that something might actually make more sense to keep an Innovator. And that kind of goes hand in hand with the next item, which is this whole idea of different hands handling different parts of the process. So it passes from person to person or from department to department, and that sounds a lot like workflow, which it is. And so Innovator is also very good for that, and that can be another good indicator for you. The last thing kind of goes without saying, but I put it in here anyway because every process we had this one checked off, and that is that they needed visibility. So we had people who needed to see where these items were in the timeline and be able to take action on that based on what they found there. So if you can't take action on something unless you know that action needs to be taken. So every process, as I said, that we moved to Innovator had that box checked off. So if you're looking at a process that has 2 or more of these checked off, you might want to consider what Innovator can do for it. Okay, examples. I'm going to get one example out of this. Let me get started here. Actually, before I get started on this, I should say that what I'm going to show you here, and the title was up there before, is called Technical Documents. And that's not to be confused with technical documentation that Aras is going to be introducing. So that's one thing I want to say. The other thing is that visual collaboration, which John Sterling talked about earlier, that may end up kind of overtaking this module that I'm going to show you here. And we are in the process of upgrading to version 11 right now, so that we might end up moving to that with this system. And as well as technical documentation, that also may end up making this obsolete. But that's all right, that's just progress. And in the meantime, what we've been doing with this has saved us a ton of time, so that's really what we're going after here. So technical documents got started, one of our marketing folks came to us and they said, hey, we want to have something in Innovator that can help us keep track of these technical documents that are circulating in the company. So these are things like instructions, spec sheets, valve body layouts, that kind of stuff. So marketing creates these documents with our graphics software, and then they circulate among a set of employees that are there and qualified to be able to make decisions about if it's correct and comprehensive and that kind of thing. So the issue that we were facing was basically one of visibility here. So our old process had been to print out a hard copy, put it in a colored folder, and with a list of people that needed to see it, and then drop it on the first person's desk. And then that person would make changes to the hard copy, and then they'd check off their name, put that on the next person's desk, and so on down the line. It's not difficult to see the issues that crop up with this thing, though, right? I mean, you drop it on someone's desk, and then it gets immediately buried under a pile of paperwork, and it just sits there until someone figures out that progress has stopped on that item. So the problem we had was marketing was spending so much time trying to track down where these things were and who had it on their desk that other projects were suffering as a result. So we turned to Innovator to see what we could do with it, and this is what we're doing now. So the main improvement that we made here is pretty much right on the main grid, and that is that a circulation organizer, the person that is responsible for making sure it makes it through the process here, they can come to this thing and immediately find a technical document and see who's responsible for it right now, who it's assigned to. That right there was 90% of what we needed to get done with this thing. But let me actually open one of these things so I can show you what it looks like. And again, this is pretty rudimentary compared to what a lot of other companies are doing out here, but the goal here is really just process improvement and efficiency here. So the circulation organizer will create one of these things, and they'll assign themselves to that field to let everyone know that this is the person managing this. We've got some item level properties like project and part number that point off to other items in Innovator. And then we've got some other fields that are really just there to help us define what we're trying to accomplish with this technical document. The Documents tab down here is what we've been using to upload our documents. So we've been using check-in, check-out, which has worked really well for us, and just PDFs and the commenting functionality that's built into Adobe Reader. So a reviewer will come in here and check out the document, make changes in the comments, check it back in, move it on to the next person, and we're good to go. So the organizer will upload the documents here, and then on the Circ List tab, they'll define the list of people that need to be able to review this document. So one of the issues that we faced here was that the list of people that needed to review a document might change from circulation to circulation. So these folks are on circulation 1, but the next time it goes around, they might not be on there at all, or we might have different set, a few replaced, that kind of thing. What we ended up doing was just using a simple null relationship on here where the organizer can mark the current circulation and the reviewer. And the other columns are just used, you can't really see the notes. This is a notes column over here, but I think we're just, anyway. So this is a notes column so that they can just record their action that they took. The Consults tab I just mentioned real quick is a feature that we've used in a lot of our modules. And we use it to keep track of comments that we don't want to be able to be changed or modified after they've been added here. So they're comments that we always want to be able to refer back to and said, hey, that person said that. And again, this may change when we've got the visual collaboration stuff going on. It might be a lot easier to do this. But what it does give us the option to do is, if I create a new one here, let's lock this guy. If I create a new comment, we type in our comment down here, but we also have the option of sending this comment as an email to someone else. And so we'll often use that as a way to kind of draw someone into collaborating on this technical document with us. It's got a link to the technical document directly to be able to handle that. So I'm not going to save the changes there. So once the organizer has uploaded their documents and they've defined a circulation list, the only thing they need to do now is assign it to the next person in the list. So we use the responsible field for that. So I'm just going to, I know how he's spelled in Innovator, so I'm just going to type it in here, Brian Wing. So he's the first person in the list here. I'm just going to hit save, unlock and close. So what's going to happen is, you couldn't see it there at first, but the technical document was in a pending status, and now it moved to circ in progress, which is just handled by a custom method in the background that looks at a few properties on the item and moves it along. The other thing that happens is that Brian Wing just gets a quick email here that notes that a new technical document has been assigned to him, and he can click on the link to get directly to that technical document in Innovator. So he'll go in and he'll make his changes and comments, he'll check it back in, and then he'll assign it to the next person in the list. And just so you know, the order of people that are reviewing these things has often been important for us. So that was another feature that we needed to keep in mind. So once it gets all the way back to the circulation organizer, they upload their new PDF, and then they create a new circulation based on whatever set of people need to review it the second time around. So they'll add additional lines down here with circ number 2, reviewer, and then move it along. We do actually have an action up here called build new circ from original, because there are plenty of times when the set of circulation, people on the circulation don't change. So we can use that to just replicate a new circulation with the same people on it. Once everything is completely done and it gets back to the circulation organizer again, and they'll upload the final document. The only other, well, I could have done that from there, but the only other thing they need to do is right-click on it and do promote, and they just promote it to the completed status. And that fills in the the date completed field on the form, and it also assigns it to Innovator Admin, just so we don't have anyone currently responsible for it. So that's our technical documents module. That's what we've been doing right now. I'm not going to go through the details of really how it's built, because that's not what this is really all about, what my presentation is about. But what I will say is that it's supported by 3 item types, a handful of custom methods, and a 3-state life cycle. And no workflow at all. That's pretty much all there is to it. And before we ended up moving to Innovator to get this done, we were able to handle about 26 technical documents per month. That's what we're able to get through. With moving to Innovator, we're now able to go through about 45. So we've increased our throughput by about 75%, which at the end of the day for us, we were pretty happy with. And there are many fewer projects that really get hung up as a result of this. The other thing I want to mention is that I do realize that with this particular module that I showed you, it can be considered to be part of the PLM infrastructure, or whatever you want to call it. You might have already had something like that in your current PLM workflows, but the main point here is that for us, it wasn't part of our PLM rollout. So we saw a process that was broken, and we fixed it in Innovator. And that's really what we're going after here. So the bottom line that I'm saying here is, don't stop looking for ways that Aras can make your business better. I mean, one of the best things about Innovator is that we can do just about anything we want in it. And when we do that, maybe you don't want to build a double-decker couch, even if it does have cup holders, but step outside the PLM box. When you do that, you're going to find that you put yourself on a much higher plane of efficiency, and to be honest, it is a heck of a lot of fun too.